if he were to join Kansas, like a Jalen Coleman-Lands type or Isaiah Moss type.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that would be, I think, that would be like, I guess, if I'm Kansas and I'm thinking, hey, this is a player I'm considering adding to my roster, that would be what I would envision like the ceiling to be. Pay heed all who enter and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. And of course, as always, I'm joined by Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, on audio. Also, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe there at Kansas Jocks, KCSN on YouTube. We've got some fantastic folks that comment there. You can join in on a great community of people on YouTube. We're pushing for 1,000 subscribers before the start of football season. We're at about 925. So you can help us get to our goal as well as we continue to grow our JOC community of fans. So really appreciate you if you have already done that. And if you haven't, it just takes one click. That's all you got to do. And you can also leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify if you're listening on the audio side. That helps us grow our community as well, and appreciate you if you have done that also. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Kansas basketball as Kansas continues to navigate through this offseason. They still have a number of spots to fill, as we've been talking about over the past basically 2 months at this point, as Kansas tries to fill out its roster. They've already got the new guys on campus. They've already been participating in summer basketball. So you've got the freshmen on campus, guys like Darren Peterson. You've already got some of your transfers on campus, guys like Trey White, Melvin Council, and Jaden Dawson. But this is a roster that is very much incomplete, and Kansas still trying to fill that out before they get into the fall and then get ready for the upcoming season in 2025. So we'll touch on the latest updates with that, as Kansas did have a visitor on campus over the weekend. We'll talk about that. Plus, the international withdrawal deadline from the NBA draft was this weekend. We'll talk about a couple of names maybe that Kansas could potentially get involved with, possibly, as they look to fill out their roster. And also, late last week, the conference schedule was dropped for Kansas on the basketball side. So we'll touch on that as well later on in the show. But as I said, kind of I think the top story, at least for me, coming out of the weekend, Kevin, is the fact that Kansas did have another visitor on campus as they continue to recruit players to try to fill out their roster. This is an interesting one. He's from the Division II level, and that is Cameron McDowell. He played his past 2 seasons at Northwestern Oklahoma State. He's had a bit of an interesting collegiate journey. He actually started his career at Georgia back in 2021. Had a bit of an issue. There was, I think, some legal stuff that happened to him. He ended up heading to Jacksonville State, played at Jacksonville State for 1 season, and then has spent his last 2 years at the Division II level at Northwestern Oklahoma State. And just to put a little bit of perspective on what this guy could do, at Northwestern Oklahoma State this past season, he averaged 27 points per game. He was a really solid free throw shooter. He shot 39% from 3 on very, very high volume. So he's certainly, when you look at the box score, you think this guy might have a chance to be able to play. And obviously, considering he started his career at the D1 level, there's certainly, I think, reason to believe that there is some talent there. But what's kind of your take on this type of player? He's a 6'6" wing. So obviously, ding, 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 like that checks the box that Kansas needs right now, which is at the wing position. So is this a player that you think that Kansas could potentially bring in and where he might slot in? And is this something that you think Kansas fans could be excited about, adding a player like this?
Yeah, when you're looking at your final 3 or 4 spots, I do think that one of the needs that sort of jumps out with, like you made the ding, ding, ding noise, it had 5 exclamation points, is Kansas needs a wing shooter in particular. And by wing shooter, I don't mean like a 6'2" guy. I mean some guy that's got some legitimate positional size. And he checks both of those boxes, right? Like, I'm not saying that he's going to come in and, hey, you average 27 a game at D2, you're going to average, 20 in the Big 12 or whatever. But I do think that when you look at the skill set specifically and say, hey, this is a guy that's 6'5", 6'6", gives you a little more size in that wing group, is a guy that, can catch and shoot at a pretty high level at this point. And not a guy that shot, hey, he shot 40% from 3, but he took 2 threes a game. Like, you're talking about a guy that took over 7 threes a game, if I remember right, about 7.5. And so when you look at that in particular, there's a pretty good shooting resume there. You brought up the free throw shooting as well as another indicator that, hey, this maybe wasn't a 1 year thing that this guy shot really well. He's probably just a good shooter. And for those who are wondering, I actually covered Division II basketball. I think you've been to some Division II basketball stuff too, haven't you?
And some NAIA, yep, at that level.
Yeah, for sure. And so the 3-point line, same exact distance, right? Like that part doesn't change. The free throw line doesn't change. There's a gap in athleticism and things like that, and a size gap. And so I do think that there's a difference there. Division II is still a pretty fairly skilled level, though, Nick, when you watch those games. And so I do think that when you're looking at these last few spots, this is a guy that can kind of fill some of those things that you're looking for in that one spot.
Well, I think a lot of people, you can look to what Ben McCollum did, going from Division II and bringing a number of transfers with him to the Division I level and having success, including Bennett Sturts, who ended up being obviously a phenomenal player for Drake. So, absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the difference in levels. I think a lot of times when you're talking about high major Division I basketball versus D2 NAIA as you go down the list, really the biggest difference is athleticism and size, right? Like, you're going to have a guy who's 6'7", who's probably one of the tallest players on the floor, but that doesn't mean that there aren't players that have a lot of basketball skill or high basketball IQ at that level. And when you turn a little bit of the highlights, maybe if you've seen of McDowell, one of the things he does is he's a big time spot up shooter. He can spot up in the corner and knock down shots. And when you think about the way this Kansas roster is built, Darren Peterson, we expect to be sort of a do-it-all type of guy. Melvin Council's a bit more of a slasher, right? Jaden Dawson, I think, can be a little bit of all that. But if you were to throw in a guy who can spot up and shoot, and when Darren Peterson drives to the rim, I would expect probably he's going to draw a lot of defensive attention.
Yeah.
If you have a guy who's a fairly consistent high 30s, low 40s 3-point percent shooter who can stay on the perimeter and knock down shots from a spot up situation, like that would be a pretty solid addition to this KU roster, I think. So you mentioned it, McDowell, he took 205 threes last season at Northwestern Oklahoma State. And the season before that at Northwestern Oklahoma State, he didn't play the whole season for them the season before in 2023-24, but he still shot 41% on 90 attempts when he played in 22 games. So definitely, I think a guy that you can mark as a pretty decent 3-point shooter. And people may be scared of like what Kansas has had in the past with like Nick Timberlake or whatever, but I view McDowell as more of if he were to join Kansas, like a Jalen Coleman-Lands type or Isaiah Moss type.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that would be, I think, that would be like, I guess, if I'm Kansas and I'm thinking, hey, this is a player I'm considering adding to my roster, that would be what I would envision like the ceiling to be. Like Jalen Coleman-Lands, Isaiah Moss type player that can come in and knock down some threes, give you some spot minutes, maybe make a few starts. I think Isaiah Moss had a few starts when he played at Kansas. Like that's probably the ceiling I would think for a player like this. I mean, I wouldn't like, I guess I shouldn't say ceiling. I guess I would say like, that would be like my highest expectation basically of what he would bring to Kansas. And again, truthfully, Kansas could use something like that. When you look at where this roster is at, you mentioned it, they still have 3 open spots. This is a player that has a lot of high major interests, truthfully. And I think that speaks to a couple of different factors. Number one, obviously teams will look at this guy and say, 27 points per game. It doesn't matter what level you're playing at. Certainly you have some scoring prowess, right, if that's the case. But two, we've talked about it. There are a lot of other schools around the country that are in a similar position to Kansas and that they have an additional spot or two available. And you think about a player like this that has the potential for maybe a higher ceiling than somebody else. Why not take a risk on? And Kansas, I was going to ask you this, Kevin, is Kansas is in a position to afford that, to say, hey, this is a player that's maybe is higher risk, I guess, in terms of he might have a low floor coming from the level versus what he could do, versus should Kansas be looking for, if there's any other options, as a more stable option, I guess, so to speak.
It's funny you asked that because I actually kind of see this as a fairly stable option. Like I think that when you're swinging on like some of the international guys that we're going to talk on a little bit later, maybe there's a floor that's down here, where it's like, hey, the transition doesn't go well. They don't wind up playing a major role. The transition is very difficult. And so I see them having a lower floor, but potentially that higher ceiling where it's, hey, things click. This guy is somebody who checks some boxes that maybe you wouldn't have even been able to get with like a high school recruit, in terms of, positional size and what they're able to do with that size, whether it's ball handling, shooting, etc. But I think with McDowell, I think if you go in looking at it like, hey, this is a guy that could be a big time scorer, I think you're absolutely right. Where it's like, okay, there's a lot more projection there in terms of, is this guy legitimately going to come in and be able to score in Big 12 games? And the answer is not necessarily no, Nick. Like it might be yes. And you watch the tape and there's some smoothness there. There's some things that you could get excited about there where you're like, okay, maybe this guy can be more than a shooter. But if you go in, and I like the way you put it, where it was like, this isn't his ceiling, but this is sort of my highest expectation is, this guy comes in, he's a 6'5", 6'6" catch and shoot guy. I actually think he's a fairly stable take at that point when you're projecting just that and saying, hey, can you come in and do this part? Look, we've talked about it on this show before, where we feel like Kansas maybe needs another starting caliber wing. And that doesn't mean he needs to start. He could be the sixth man, and Jaden Dawson could be in the starting lineup. Maybe Jaden Dawson becomes the sixth man. That guy joins the starting lineup, but somebody else to join that group. I don't know that McDowell is that guy, right? But if you're taking him specifically, like, hey, this guy is going to be our seventh or eighth guy, he's going to be in that group. If he's having a good year catching and shooting, maybe we can't take him off the court. Maybe he becomes a really important guy to have out there. With the 2019-2020 team, you mentioned Isaiah Moss. When David McCormick went down, or went out, I guess, after the K-State suspension, you had Isaiah Moss join the starting lineup, and Isaiah Moss was mostly just a catch and shoot guy. Didn't even really have that great of a year as a catch and shoot guy compared to what his abilities were and what he previously could do. But I felt like that really unlocked a lot for that team, just him being on the court and having the threat of him being out there to catch and shoot. And what's the one thing you always say on this show, Nick? You always say it's not about the shooting, it's about the
just make your opponent guard the entire half court, basically.
Yeah, and so, I could see a similar situation where you're bringing this guy in as your seventh or eighth guy. Hey, he's more shooting. And you get to a point where it's like, well, teams have to respect him being out there. They have to get out there on him, whether he's shooting 34%, coming up, whether he's shooting 42%, and he becomes a hard guy to take off the floor. I don't know that looking at him right now, I say this is your starting caliber wing, but I still think that he could be a pretty important piece and somebody that could become, sort of that starting caliber wing, depending on the way things shake out.
Like I said, he has been receiving a little bit more high major interest, and he wrapped up his visit this past weekend. Something else we talk about as the cardinal rule on the show is if you leave uncommitted, that's a little scary or interesting. So I guess that's something to keep an eye on as well. If KU continues to recruit him, and if this is a player that decides to take other visits, could be something to monitor as well. So McDowell's the latest really big name in terms of a player that Kansas seems to have real traction with in terms of getting him on a visit. But also over the weekend, on Sunday, actually on June 15th, was the final day for international players to withdraw from the NBA draft. We talked about it. For players coming from the NCAA level, that withdrawal date was much earlier at the end of May. For international players, a little bit extra time until into the middle of June. And a couple of guys that did withdraw over the weekend that maybe you might want to familiarize yourself with if KU has some interest. I think, we talked about needing a starting caliber wing player as one of KU's biggest needs. Certainly Kansas still needs another big as well when you look at kind of how thin that room is, considering you have Flory, and then after that it's basically Bryson Tiller, who hasn't played competitive basketball in over a year at this point. So you'd like to add another body there. A couple of potential names to keep an eye on in terms of big men that withdrew. Michael Rusic, I think is how you say it, an 18-year-old 7-foot Croatian player. Also, Momo Faye, who is from Senegal, played professionally in Italy this past season. He is 6'10". He could be a name to watch. And then in terms of wings, obviously we talked about McDowell, who was just on campus visiting KU. You also have Ben Henshaw, who is a 6'6" Australian wing who played in the NBL last season. Also, as I guess a guy that to keep an eye on potentially for Kansas. Certainly, KU. Obviously, you think about Australia, they had Furphy.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech and Florida may be out in front on that one, but it would be certainly he checks a lot of the boxes that in terms of what you would be looking for in that quote unquote starting caliber wing. I know Henshaw, I think he averaged 9.5 points per game, somewhere around there. And I know people are going to be like, "Oh, that's not a lot." We're talking about a pro league, like that's a little bit different than averaging 9.5 for your high school team. And so he would be a guy that, another guy with a smooth shooting stroke, has some handle, some creativity. Like, I'm not saying KU will get Henshaw, but I'm saying when we've been talking on this show about, hey, what can you get internationally? What should you target? Like, that's kind of the archetype, I would say, for sort of an international wing that you would look at and say, okay, this is a guy that has some upside, has some experience playing pro ball. I think he's a little bit older. I think he's like 20.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
But yeah, a guy like that, if KU could bring in, if not Henshaw himself, somebody like Henshaw, I think would be a major boon to this team, along with like you've talked about, sort of the backup big man spot.
Yeah, the other name, a guy that we've talked about previously, is Nicholas Abdelas, who also withdrew, but again, seemingly verbally committed to Virginia Tech, or is going to be ending up in Virginia Tech. It would seem, I think. So, he's Kevin. He picked the school with the wrong, with the trying to think of the right word. With the wrong mascot that is not entirely real. What is a hoax? Like, come on, what is
the mythical bird? Yeah,
exactly. Like, he picked the wrong one. Pick the wrong one. Come on, come be a Jayhawk instead. But no, it seems like that might be the avenue for him to go. So those are just a couple of the names I think that would be most relevant to Kansas, considering KU's needs and kind of where things are at in terms of players that have withdrawn. Like you said, Henshaw is a very intriguing name. Well, I think he's going to be a guy that is going to have a number of high major programs taking a look at him. And then Faye, the 6'10" Senegalese big man, I think is another one maybe to keep a closer eye on. I would say another guy that seems like he might have quite a bit of draw from NCAA programs as well. So a couple of the international names to watch. And then, of course, Cameron McDowell, who just wrapped up his visit to KU over the weekend. Oh, that wasn't the only news from last week and over the weekend for Kansas. KU also announced their conference schedule, and Kevin and I will break that down coming up next. Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
Folks, it's playoff time, and if you're still just watching the games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers can get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. Here's what you got to do. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdictions. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. And remember, if you haven't already, please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, or if you are on our YouTube channel, subscribe there, Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Like our videos over on YouTube, drop a comment. We've got some great commenters that share their thoughts. We love to hear from you guys, so please continue to do that. And that's a great way to join in on the conversation with us. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers before we get to football season, and we appreciate it if you were one of those. So if you have not, please go ahead and subscribe over there. You can also leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your audio. Also, that helps us grow our show and grow the channel. So I really appreciate you if you have done that. And if you haven't, take a few moments and say some nice things about us, right? Everybody needs a little bit of an ego boost. You could say a couple nice things. Or honestly, if you think we suck, you could say we suck. I'm okay with that too. I accept all criticism. If you think we suck, we suck. It is what
Visa, MasterCard, and criticism. Nick Express, he takes it all.
All forms of payment. Yeah, that's right. All forms of payment. So the other news from late last week that we didn't get a chance to touch on is Kansas announcing its conference schedule for this upcoming season. And obviously, Kevin, prior to about 2 years ago, the announcement of the conference schedule was a giant nothing burger because it was, hey, you're going to play every other team in the conference 2 times each, home and home. Oh, great. Thanks. All right. That's an easy conference release. Sure. No problem. But with the expansion, there is a little bit of intrigue now involved in it because of the fact that you don't play every team twice. You are going to get some teams only at home. You're going to have to go play at some teams only and not get them to come down Fieldhouse. And you will get some teams that you play twice. So before I get into the conference schedule, quickly, we kind of broke it down on our show last week, but just very quickly, I went through the non-conference schedule that was already out. So KU's going to play 2 exhibition games. They're going to play against Louisville at the KFC Yum Center. Then they're going to play Fort Hays in their exhibition. They get Green Bay. They go at North Carolina, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Princeton. They'll play Duke in the Champions Classic. They've got the Players Era and NIL tournament in Las Vegas with a lot of big name schools over the Thanksgiving week. They get UConn at home. They're going to play Missouri and Kansas City. They go at NC State, Towson, and Davidson. So that's the non-conference schedule. Again, we kind of broke it down more in depth on our show last week. So if you want to check that out, you can. I was kind of discussing that. But looking ahead now to the conference schedule for Kansas in the Big 12, and Kansas obviously struggled a little bit in conference play last year for various reasons. And so you look at the conference schedule for this year, again, you don't have the order of the games you're going to be playing in. You don't have like when you're going to be playing who, where. You just have who you're going to be playing, who you're going to be playing twice, home and away, who you're going to be playing only on the road, who you're going to be playing only at home. So we'll start with the teams you'll play both. Right. I think these make a lot of sense. Kansas State, obviously, makes sense. Iowa State, again, obviously makes sense. Those are the 2 schools geographically the closest to you. And the other one is Arizona. And that's an interesting one. You get to go home and home against Arizona. Obviously, Arizona came down Fieldhouse. You didn't end up going out there last year to play Arizona, but now you'll get them both ways this year. So obviously, number one, glad that you get K-State again twice. Like that's a no-brainer, obviously. And I think Iowa State similarly. Obviously, there was a couple of years in there where Iowa State you went to Hilton and they never came back, and that was very irritating. So I'm mainly just glad you get Iowa State home and home, and in case you do end up going to Ames and losing again, at least you have a chance to get them back at home.
Yeah, if you look at the last 15 years or so, I mean, the biggest rivalry in the Big 12 maybe is Kansas-Iowa State, right? And so that's one that I would love to see protected. I'd love to see K-State and Iowa State both protected, and then that third game can kind of shift around. I know some people were a little frustrated with Arizona getting that spot. You know, KU had Houston a year ago. Arizona is going to be very good. That wasn't necessarily the issue. The issue is, Nick, a lot of people wanted to see a home and away with BYU this year with Darren Peterson going against AJ Dubbanza.
Yeah, and obviously those two have already developed a little bit of a rivalry in high school. If you've been paying attention at the high school level, they've met a number of times at the high school ranks. And spoiler alert, Darren Peterson's kind of gotten the best of AJ by Dubbanza, truthfully, at the high school level.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. That seemed like a bit of a miss, but like you said, Arizona is going to be very good. And I think from the Big 12 perspective, you want your top teams playing each other the most. Like, that's going to get the most eyeballs. That's going to get the most people watching. So it makes sense that Kansas would get another top team that you're going to be playing home and away, right? Like you said with Houston. But BYU would have been a cool one, but not to be the case. Instead, it's Arizona that you get to the home and away for both. Now, this is where things get interesting, Kevin. You look at the teams that Kansas is going to be only playing at Allen Fieldhouse this year. And you run through that list. You've got Baylor, BYU, who we just talked about, Cincinnati, Houston, TCU, and Utah. That's a pretty damn good draw for KU in terms
of the projected like Big 12 contenders. And I get it's still early. People are still filling out rosters, whatever else. Texas Tech is the only one that KU kind of only has to go on the road to and doesn't get back at Allen Fieldhouse. And so, yeah, that's a very pleasant draw, especially over the last few years. We've seen Kansas obviously not have the most success going on the road. Even if Utah isn't necessarily going to be great, the fact that you don't make another trip out to Utah is not necessarily a rough deal. I think Arizona State, probably not going to be super great. UCF, is a road game. Oklahoma State is still really building that group, and West Virginia and Colorado are the other two on the road, along with Texas Tech. And so, yeah, if you're saying, hey, we want the best teams to come to Allen Fieldhouse and don't want to go on the road for as many tough games, you got it. Like, this is the slate for you. The only thing that would have made it quote unquote perfect is if you would have traded out somebody for maybe Texas Tech. And so that's how close it was to an ideal draw, I think, for Kansas at this point.
Yeah, truthfully, that was my biggest takeaway looking at this. Just instant reaction was like, holy hell, this is a fantastic draw for Kansas because you get K-State, Iowa State, and Arizona both home and away. Like, okay, Iowa State, K-State, you could have guessed Arizona's going to be good, but you get them home and away, right? Then you look at your teams that you're going to be playing only at home, which you kind of outlined. Like, Baylor will probably be a pretty solid team. Get them only at home. BYU, we just talked about with AJ Dubbanza, they're probably going to be pretty strong, a pretty good team. You only have to play them at home. Houston, obviously, that goes without saying. You only get them at home, right? And then you look at the teams you play on the road. Arizona State, a team that's not very good. UCF, obviously, Kansas had trouble with them on the road, so I don't want to just poo-poo that one away. But even still, like, probably at best a mid-tier team.
Not last year though, right? Like, KU actually like 50 piece UCF in Orlando a year ago.
I guess I'm looking at last year though, from like you played them at home and it was still a tight game, right?
Yeah.
So you lose on the road.
DeJuan didn't play in that one, right?
I think you're right. I don't believe he did. But that was Keyshawn Hall, obviously going off.
Sure. And then played him in the Big 12 tournament, and that was a tight one too.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to just poo-poo UCF. Like, listen, we've probably already lost all of our UCF Golden Knights fans because they keep calling us Golden Knights. Oh, it's actually just the Knights now. Oh, okay. My bad, guys. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, so I don't want to poo-poo that one away. But then you get Colorado, again, same thing. A team that was in the NCAA tournament, but probably like a mid-tier team. You mentioned Oklahoma State, who, if I had to guess, probably is going to be one of the worst teams in the conference again, I would think.
I think they'll be better, but yeah, I think they'll still be at or around the bottom. I think it'll be somewhat similar to Houston in football, where it's like, hey, this is a job that you can see them improving and getting a little bit better, but the horses just aren't all there at this point.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Gallagher-Iba is such a historic, cool arena. Like, that's a place where you'd like to go with it to be a fun environment to play in, right? And it just just hasn't been because Oklahoma State has been not good. And then you mentioned it, Texas Tech is basically the only one where it's like, damn, you got to go play them on the road. Don't get them back at home. Like Lubbock is obviously always a difficult place to play in. Kansas has historically struggled there. In fact, some of their worst losses in Big 12 history have come in Lubbock against Texas Tech. So that's a bit of one where it's, like, okay. And then at West Virginia, another place where it's pretty tough to play. Kansas had a difficult time playing there when West Virginia first joined the Big 12, when they still had Bob Huggins. But they kind of got over that hump a little bit, and now you get them again. They did just lose there, I guess, in their most recent game there 2 years ago. And that was the game where Kansas forgot how to play defense, and they gave up 90 points. So that's one where it's okay. We'll see with that one. But again, you're talking about, I mean, if we were to do sort of a off-season, early summer tier list of Big 12 basketball, you would put Houston, BYU, and Baylor probably in the top 5, right?
Yeah, we should do that, by the way. Like that should be a future.
It should be a future segment.
I mean, we should wait like a month until we're the
full
hospitals on this stuff. But yeah, we should 100% do that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you're looking at just sort of, we wrote this on chalk like right before the show or something, like up on the board. Like, yeah, that tier list of teams that are coming to KU, like that's with the exception of Texas Tech. I mean, those are the good ones.
Yeah. And so, okay, you get basically the top teams coming to your place. That's very favorable for Kansas, considering what Allen Fieldhouse has been in terms of a home field environment for KU. So, yeah, all in all, I think this was about as, I think I said it earlier in the show, this is about as good of a draw as you could ask for if you're Kansas, considering the circumstances. But again, just to kind of put a bookend on this whole thing, when you think about the schedule in totality, we talked about the non-conference schedule last week, but the non-conference schedule is very tough, right? I mean, there's a lot of really tough games on it, so Kansas will have to be ready pretty quick. There's not going to be a lot of time for them to sort of mess around and try to figure things out. It's going to be full go from the first game of the season.
And it's a game, right? Like go the full for KFC. I get that it doesn't count, but if you're trying to build a roster, build continuity, build confidence, that's jumping into the deep end pretty fast.
Yeah, exactly. And the rest of the non-conference schedule is pretty tough. And then again, the conference schedule, I mean, obviously we just talked about it. We feel really good about the draw for Kansas, but the reality is Kansas was the 6th, 7th best team in the conference last year in conference play. So they will have to step up regardless of what the draw is. They'll have to perform. That'll be something to keep an eye on. So, yeah, other than that, anything else you want to touch on here, Kevin, before we wrap up a little bit of a shorter show?
No, it'd be nice if KU could go ahead and add a piece or two real quick so that we, as much as we love tracking, 20 different people who may or may not, be on next year's KU basketball team, it would be nice to have an episode where we're like, hey, this guy is in. Let's talk about what he brings. So that would be pretty nice. But no, other than that, I think you hit on all the salient points on the schedule and everything, and then it's always interesting this sort of not really roster building, but sort of roster finishing part of the offseason.
First of all, I can't believe that you would think that I'm not an expert on Croatian basketball at this point.
There you go.
So, let me learn every team.
You had the NAIA background as much as you did. So, I mean,
I was actually at the so the NAIA, for those that don't know, the NAIA tournament is hosted or once they get to the Sweet 16 or whatever, it's hosted in Kansas City. It's all in Kansas City. They play it there. And so, yeah, I was fortunate enough to be a part of that this past season, actually, and do some broadcasting for them. So I got to see some NAIA talent firsthand. And yeah, I mean, just to highlight again, what we mentioned kind of earlier when talking about Cameron McDowell is that a lot of times the biggest difference when it comes to NAIA, all the way up to high major D1 basketball is really athleticism and size, right? Like, yeah. You can have plenty of players that play at lower levels that have a lot of skill, that have a high basketball IQ, that are really, really talented basketball players that maybe don't have the athleticism or the size to be a high major D1 player, but that doesn't mean that they aren't good basketball players. So that's something to keep in mind when you talk about guys jumping up from low-level divisions, is that a lot of times you can see players that do have skill, right? I mean, Diggy Coit is a great example. Kansas obviously kind of saw that firsthand last year as a guy who played at the lower level and obviously was a very undersized player, but could still be, even at the high major D1 Power 5 level, a quality bench piece to a team. So, yeah, we'll see if Kansas ends up landing a guy like Cameron McDowell from that level, and hopefully he'll get a chance to showcase his own skills at the higher level also. So, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the show. Of course, if you haven't already, please once again subscribe, Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Checks. KCSN, drop a comment, share your thoughts, join the conversation. We're getting closer to maybe starting to talk some more KU football, Kevin, as we
still have safeties to go.
Yeah, that's true. We actually have not finished our position breakdowns. So we still need to do that also. If you do want to go back and check out maybe our previous position breakdowns from the spring, we may just need to probably go through and do sort of a holistically breakdown again, because there has been some changes since the spring, obviously, with some transfer portal additions that we didn't get to talk about maybe at the time that they were added. So we are getting closer to really starting to dive a little bit deeper into KU football as they prepare for the start of their season. I mean, you think about it, Kevin, we're like probably about a month away from fall camp starting ahead of the start of the season. If that,
yeah, it's not that long, especially with KU starting the season early this year, with them having a week 0 game. They're going to be there, and even just slightly before that, Big 12 Media Days will be in about a month or so.
Yep.
So
So
I always consider that kind of the start of the new season, because after that point, everybody is sort of really locked in on football at that point.
Yeah, so Big 12 Media Days, actually, Kevin, as you mentioned it, they are July 8th, July 9th is
less than
for Big 12. Yep, for Big 12 Media Days. So we will certainly have some reactions to that, to whatever is said there by Lance Leipold and the players also. And that'll, as you said, maybe just kind of kick off straight into KU football season. And we're planning on doing, as we did last year, some live reaction shows as much as we can after every game. So this will definitely be the place you want to come hang out after KU football games, where you can join in with other KU fans, have a good conversation. Obviously, we'll be breaking down the game and talking about them live after the game, so you can be on the lookout for that. That's one more reason to stay subscribed on our YouTube channel, because those will be YouTube live shows that you can see immediately after the games to get our instant reactions to KU football as they progress through the 2025 season. So another reason to subscribe over on our YouTube channel, so you can be notified once we get to football season about live shows and so on and so forth. So, but until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.